Isn't it remarkable how the reverence in which the Commonwealth was reportedly held during Brexit conversations has disappeared? I mean, how quickly claims that we'd be closer to the Commonwealth. We don't need to be in the European Union because we should be treating our Commonwealth neighbours, our Commonwealth partners with more respect and with more gratitude. You remember that, right? It was a big thing. Somehow the Commonwealth felt less foreign to xenophobes than the European Union did. Well, not anymore, because Commonwealth heads of government are preparing to defy the United Kingdom and agree plans to examine reparatory justice for the transatlantic slave trade. How many Commonwealth countries do you think there are? Do you want to have a guess? 56. It says 56 here. Which is really? One of them suspended? Holy moly. No one tells me anything. What for? Is it VAR? I think there might have been a coup in one of them, but they're still technically a Commonwealth country. They are just a suspended Commonwealth country. You don't cease to be a Commonwealth country when you are suspended, only when you are expelled. But Gabon, I think, is having a little local difficulty at the moment. The Foreign Minister of the Bahamas has told the BBC, who have broken this story, that once you broach the subject, it may take a while for people to come around, but come around they will. Keir Starmer hasn't. He's rejected calls for any talks at all at the current meeting of the Commonwealth in Samoa, and has essentially insisted that the focus on the future of the Commonwealth should be the main concern of the conversation. He's ruled out compensation for the UK's historical role in the slave trade. Things that there's no point... what's the word I want? But things that there's no point regurgitating unless you do a little bit of research first in the context of this conversation include, well, the Irish were enslaved as well, or we were the first to abolish it, or we spent loads of money already, because these are all historically untrue. I'm fascinated by, as you know, the effort that is put into persuading us to believe things that are against our own interest. Because if you end up believing things that are against your own interest, you can then vote against your own interest. You can do things that are bad for you and your children. And, of course, we only have to go back to 2016 for a masterclass in exactly what that looks like. And I've been a little bit puzzled. Listen, you can probably guess the kind of question I'm going to ask at the end of this pontification, so feel free to book your place early on the switchboard. But I have been a little bit puzzled by the Venn diagram of people who spend enormous amounts of money secretly to promote incredibly unpatriotic and damaging ideas while dressing themselves up in Union flags and the language of patriotism. You know, when they talk about a small state or small government, and then you open your eyes and realise that we spend our lives talking about areas of our shared existence where we need more investment and we need more bodies, we need more staff, whether you were talking about the NHS or whether you're talking about schools, whether you're talking about social care, whether you're talking about the army or the police service, prisons or the probation, a building, house, all of these areas where government needs to be bigger and needs to be stronger. And yet the narrative in this country, the public discourse in this country, thanks largely to the infestation of deeply disingenuous lobby groups that call themselves think tanks or educational charities, they have managed to skew the dialogue, to skew the conversation. But why would they also be so heavily invested in attempts to rewrite history? Or at least in attempts to stop other people from doing proper history? Why would, for example, someone heavily involved in, I don't know, let's say the Institute of Economic Affairs, ludicrous misnomer, the Institute of Economic Affairs, the Institute of Wizard Wheezes, why would someone heavily involved in that outfit also be heavily involved in trying to get the National Trust to stop publishing history of National Trust properties, especially when that history involves explanations of where the money came from? Have you ever visited a National Trust property? I presume if you've never visited one, you've driven past one. Before the children came along, and actually for a while they were younger, Mrs. O'Brien and I had a lovely habit of, if we weren't in a rush to get wherever we were going, if we passed one of those brown signs on an A road, we'd go and have a look. We'd go and have a butcher's. I think we joined English Heritage and National Trust. And it was glorious. But the thing you do, it's a bit like looking at St. Paul's or looking at a massive cathedral in somewhere like Ely or Lincoln. You look at it with your 21st century sensibilities, your 21st century eyes. Sounds like a pop song, that, 21st century eyes. And you just wonder how the hell it happened. How did it get built? How on earth did it get built? And the accrual of cash, the epic imbalance between the kind of people who could build a stately home and everybody else in the country. And then I remember a story that really stuck in my mind, really stuck in my memory, about Capability Brown, the gardener. It's a slightly underselling him with that title. But I remember that he was doing some landscaping for an aristocrat, and the aristocrat wanted... Or Capability Brown decided he was going to move a river. So all the sort of local workers from thereabouts were employed for the duration of that job to reroute a river so that the bloke's view from his stately home would look nicer. And I loved that story until I just, for no reason particularly, suddenly realised that I didn't know what they did afterwards. You didn't have trade unions or contracts in those days. So it's all very well us looking at this amazing view, enjoying this amazing vista, paying our couple of quid and buying a guidebook to go around these amazing houses. But what we really need to know is the role that they played and what they can tell us about the society that people were inhabiting at the time. And oddly, the same sort of vampires that run these think tanks are dedicated to trying to keep the truth about slavery, for example, or epic inequality from the public. And I had a penny drop moment last week. I realised why. And it's for the same reason. It's about sustaining a hideously unfair status quo. That's all it is. Understand that, you understand almost everything. Imagine if you arrived in... I can't like Panem. Are you familiar with the Hunger Games? Have you seen the Hunger Games or read the Hunger Games? So all dystopians have a kind of pinnacle, right? All dystopias have a pinnacle. So if the massive majority of the population is oppressed, there will be some people living at the top of the pyramid, and they will be living lives of untrammeled luxury, epic luxury, on the backs of the labour of everybody else. These are extreme examples. We don't inhabit a dystopia. Although some of the stories coming out of America suggest that they might be doing so soon. And the people at the very top live lives of extraordinary luxury, funded and subsidised by the labour of everybody below them. And, of course, if that labour is unpaid, then it is slavery. And if those labourers are owned by other people, the people destined to be or already located at the very top of the pyramid, then the last thing on earth that their descendants would want, or that people who still quite like the status quo that we've got today, or people who consider themselves to be either current or future beneficiaries of epic inequality, the last thing they want is to let the dog see the rabbit. And guess what? We're the dog. You and me are the dog. And they don't want us to see the rabbit. Because what the hell happens if we really start to get our heads around historical injustice? What? And how can I stop you from caring about this? Well, I will appeal, as I did with Brexit, and as I am with the European Convention of Human Rights, if I was honest Bob Jenrick, I'm going to appeal to your xenophobic impulses. We all have xenophobic impulses. The challenge is deciding how readily you're going to allow them to be excited. I could challenge your I could excite your xenophobic impulses to such a degree that you might gather outside a hotel full of asylum seekers and call for it to be set on fire. Or you might take to social media to complain about people being jailed for doing so. That's all xenophobic impulse. You wouldn't be doing that if the hotel was full of people you know, or people that look like you, or people you're related to, or people that you like. So it's all a xenophobic impulse. So how can I get people to stop worrying about the status quo? How can I distract them from the epic inequality upon which the class structure and the distribution of wealth in this country is built? I could bring a little bit of racism into it. Which is why suddenly all of the Commonwealth leaders that Brexiters told you they wanted to treat with increased respect and enormous reverence and build bigger bonds, return to the days when the Commonwealth would be our bigger trading partner as opposed to the EU, well, they're coming in for a kicking today from precisely the same people that told you we should be doing more business with them. Why? because they are preparing to defy the United Kingdom and agree plans to examine reparatory justice for the transatlantic slave trade. Now, I've just given you what I would call some socio-economic analysis or some historical analysis. What I'm not giving you there is a particularly strong opinion on whether or not reparations should be paid to the descendants of slaves. You're going to do that. I'm not an activist, if you like, in this space. I don't have enough skin in the game. And I don't know where the money would come from. I don't know what purpose it would necessarily serve. But I follow and read a lot of people who do. One of them, Satnam Sanghera, who wrote the book Empire Land, is pretty clear on what he thinks is going on here and indeed what should be going on here. He describes Keir Starmer's refusal to discuss reparations as short-sighted and ultimately self-defeating. He describes the reparations conversation as a way of resetting Britain's relationship with large parts of the world. He says we should see it as an investment, and in Britain it is always depicted as a shakedown. And of course, marry that to what I just said, and it is a shakedown being perpetrated by people of colour. So it appeals both to our sense of isolation, insularity, and it appeals to our xenophobic impulses as well. How dare Johnny Foreigner? They used to know their place, these Commonwealth types. They used to know exactly who was in charge. How dare they come along and demand that money be paid in reparation for the transatlantic slave trade? But that's not the end of the conversation, is it? It's not just about money. Obviously, it's not just about money. It's about something that runs a lot deeper than that. Something that I would hope you would be able to tell me about. Because if you've got all three of the candidates to be the next director of the Commonwealth, all speaking as one on this issue, then you've got a problem at the very heart of the Commonwealth. And the reason that I was teasing Brexiters early was because you claim to care about the Commonwealth. You claimed to care very deeply about the Commonwealth. So theoretically, you should care very deeply about fractures appearing in the Commonwealth, and the fact that all major leaders, all heads of government are preparing to defy the United Kingdom and start the conversation about reparatory justice. So what's your relationship with slavery? Why does this matter to you? The problem with this country, public discourse in this country and the media in this country, is that so many conversations are conducted by people to whom it doesn't matter at all, or people whose xenophobic impulses have been expertly manipulated by newspaper columnists or far-right politicians or dishonest and irresponsible broadcasters. The only people who can make a meaningful and helpful contribution to this conversation are the people who know what they're talking about, not the people wanging on about abolitionism or wanging on about Irish people being indentured labour too. The people who know what it would mean to a country like the Bahamas, why in the Bahamas heads of government consider this to be so important. British officials have successfully blocked a plan for an entirely separate declaration on the subject, which feels like a form of moral colonialism, doesn't it? Telling Commonwealth leaders that they can't even have a conversation about this thing that they consider to be hugely important. And that's the world that a lot of the people that we've been teasing in this introduction think they still live in. A world where Johnny Foreigner knows his place. A world where the rich man is in his castle and the poor man is at his gate. And especially if the poor man is black, God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. The idea of equality, the idea of equanimity, the idea of equality is utterly alien to this world view, which appears in our breasts. In primary school and prep school, when we see the old maps, if you're my age, of the world being largely red. We don't live there anymore. Where do we live? Why do slavery reparations matter to you? Let's do education this morning. Let's make it clearer why people with roots in the West Indies or with roots in other corners of the Commonwealth, but obviously, most pertinently, the corners most affected by the transatlantic slave trade, why does it matter so much today that restorative justice of some sort, whether it's financial or otherwise, why does it matter so much today that restorative justice, that reparation is delivered to the descendants of people who died hundreds of years ago? Why does it matter so much to you?